Go ahead, Beros.
Okay, it's 8 o'clock. Let's start our webinar. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the webinar organized by the Ladies Wing of World Zarathustra Chamber of Commerce. I'm sure the regular members who attend our webinars sponsored by the Ladies Wing of WZCC will notice that the Ladies Wing is slowly but surely expanding. What started as an India region webinar has now expanded to 2 more regions, Middle East and USA. So ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of 3 regions and 6 chapters, I welcome you once again to our webinar, The Magic of Music and Mountains, Leaders in the Boardroom. Today, we are very, very fortunate to have with us Khurody. Most of you know her, but all those who don't, sit back and just listen to her background. It's enormous. Khurshid's background in education spans from 4 countries and multiple continents. Raised and educated in UK and USA, Khurshid completed her schooling in England and her formal higher education at Harvard. Together with her academic education, both in the humanities and in the sciences, she has a strong background in the Western performing arts and has won several prizes and awards in Western classical music. She studied classical ballet, music in UK and USA, and additionally plays piano, cello, and violin. While representing Harvard alumni in India, Khursheed seeded the Harvard Club in Mumbai. She also provided management and human resource services, specifically leadership that can be learned through music and humanities for senior management of various corporations, including L&T, Larsen & Toubro, which is well known. She honestly believes and says that the parallel between music and management is astonishing. Have I lost people? Hello?
No, go on. You're there.
Okay, sorry. I thought I'd lost you because my screen has gone blank. Khursheed presently works as a strategic advisor and consultant in both domestic and global NGOs, shaping organizational design, architecture, strategy, etc., etc. She is also involved in wildlife conservation, sustainability, solar power, girl education, skill development, and many more. Khursheed currently is the country chair of Shivya Livelihood Foundation, an international non-profit organization based with headquarters in London, and works for the poorest of poor in India. She's also on the strategy board of Sockstar Project, again headquartered in UK, and is working for wildlife. So she looks after 2-legged people and she looks after 4-legged too. In India, she sits on several non-profit boards, including Seva Sadan in Mumbai, and looks after the welfare of oppressed and marginalized girls and women, providing them with shelter, care, education. I know this organization personally. I contribute to this organization, and I know she's doing a very good job with it. Apart from that, with increasing relevance, Khursheed believes that humanities and liberal arts actually shape the leaders and make them organic, passionate, and vitally relevant. Honestly, with all her activities, I'm not sure where she finds time to relax or have any hobbies, but Khursheed says she enjoys trekking through mountains and jungles, loves the outdoor, enjoys swimming and riding, and has a deep love for reading, writing, poetry, and philosophy. So ladies and gentlemen, sit back and enjoy this wonderful, enlightening evening with Khurody. Khurshid, over to you.
Thank you very much for that warm introduction, Beros. Thank you. Our flying time today is just under that from London to Scotland. Fortunately, I managed to edit back, so it's about 52 minutes. And I thank you all for bearing with me through this, and I hope that I meet your expectations. So without further ado, we start. So the purpose behind and the relevance of this evening's discourse lies in the undisputable evidence namely that the development of a nation has to be equitable to all its members. For this to happen, leaders have to be creative, imaginative, and multifaceted, humanists who belong to multiple worlds at the same time. The magic of music in mountains, the title of my talk today, facilitates this thing that we call leadership, a subject about which so much is written, but so little practiced. My particular approach relies on the abstract, shaped by my background in the humanities and in Western classical music. Suffice to say for now that the intrinsic nature of music and all the liberal arts for that matter, and a greater engagement with the natural world, all of these things have the power to deepen immeasurably an understanding of ourselves and the world around us, hence the tagline, broadening the horizons and structures of leadership. Our journey this evening through 4 chapters, if I may call them that. The first, an introduction, a little bit about the nonprofits that I serve. The second, my role and organizational approach. The third, why do I do what I do? What impelled me to play this role? And the fourth, how, beyond structure, the dynamics of lifting all that is ordinary to become objects of passion. Let us begin with the first NGO, Shivya. Shivya was founded in the UK by Olivia Donnelly in 2008. In Calcutta, its implementing partner Nearden was founded in 2011, and in Bombay, Shivya Livelihoods Foundation in 2020. I've started with this organization because it is robust, has proven methodologies and expertise with well-defined outcomes. It's also got global standards of values, integrity, and governance. And incidentally or coincidentally, both the UK and the India chairs are Parsi. I just thought I'd mention it since we're on this forum today. Our focus is on creating livelihoods with dignity for the poorest of the poor in rural areas, for those marginalized, forgotten, and left behind, with a special focus on women. We help families lift themselves out of poverty in a sustainable way. So this slide pretty much encapsulates what I've just said. Our beneficiaries, 78% live below the poverty line, 18% work as laborers earning less than $2 a day. Shivya has 2 main programs, our Poultry Development Services, PDS, and our Agri-Management Services, AMS. Let us begin with our poultry services. You can see here a basket with 1-day-old chicks. So what do? We provide toolkits, 10 one-day-old chicks, vaccines, feed, medicines, and training, and the farmer contributes 40% towards this. The rest we subsidize. We then train them for 6 months. They then transition into groups after 2 years before becoming independent entrepreneurs. We have thus far delivered 100,000 toolkits, worked with 20,000 families, impacted over 90,000 people, created over 500 independent poultry farmers, and put 12,000 children in schools, thanks to the additional income, which is about 30% earned due to this enterprise. How do women spend this additional income? Shivya are brilliant at impact reporting, which is how I have all this data. Our findings, 51% of women spend their additional income on a second enterprise and 34% on education. Despite the lack of financial literacy, our beneficiaries understand that if one enterprise has yielded results, so will a second. Hence, they plow their funds back into business. Let's now move to our agri-management services. It's a picture of our farmers. And we form with agri-management farmer interest groups called FIGs, of 15 to 18 farmers. We test soil. We link FIGs to suppliers of agri-inputs, including bioproducts. We provide training on affordable and environmentally friendly farming techniques. We help them open group bank accounts, and we link them to government programs. The impact of this program, our agri program has resulted in an increase in profits for our farmers between approximately 30 to 50%. 60% again invest their profits into taking more land, more enterprise. They also become independent of us after 2 years, and there's so much knowledge sharing. So we've seen entire communities transform. This is a quick 3 slides of a field trip. We try and go down to grassroots levels and to field at least once a year. I'm sorry, my foot was in plaster with a walker because I broke it a few months earlier in Satpura, trekking around looking for sloth bears. So my father with the founder, Olivia Donnelly, and myself with one of our livelihood service providers and field supervisors. So what will Shivya Livelihoods Foundation do now? We look forward to accelerating the pace of change by capacity building and scaling Shivya's proven and time-tested models incrementally and strategically across the Indian subcontinent. Research and innovation is also important, and we will be investing in new programs that will contribute meaningfully to poverty alleviation, embracing partners not just in India, but all across the globe to hasten the delivery of purpose. While fulfilling its purpose, Shivya Livelihoods Foundation will also create, I hope, a much needed dimension in human resource, available to institutions, including for-profits. Today, even large corporates are struggling to find multifaceted talent that can bring fresh rigors to growth and development equitably. We also look forward to promoting via licensing Shivya's codified knowledge capital, by far its most valuable legacy, coupled with its organization dynamics and robust standards of governance. This will be of unimaginable value to nonprofits, many of which will have to realize that they just cannot run on heart alone. Experience reveals that many social purpose institutions neglect the professionalism needed to keep the institution alive, dynamic, and growing. Indeed, most have noble purposes, but they succumb to mediocrity and impact is oft insignificant. Discipline, structure, systems, processes, impact reporting, standards of accounting, governance, etc., are all conspicuous by their absence in way too many NGOs. But these organization designs and flows are vital if NGOs are to both survive and make a sustainable difference. Seva Sadan in Bombay, now 113 years old. It is both a society and a trust in South Bombay. Our buildings, they're beautiful, lovely old buildings. There's 3 pictures for you. Seva Sadan was founded in 1908 by social reformers, Mr. Bairam Malbari Parsi and Divan Jayaram Gidumal, for the emancipation, welfare, and upliftment of women and girls. Seva Sadan has a home for underprivileged girls. Here you can see the dormitory, vernacular and English schools, extracurricular programs, and other programs specifically for skilling. Here we have the pre-primary and the primary English school. We have computer classes. We have vocational training for women. And now on to a project that we did just last year. This is a project that we did in collaboration with the solar engineering team of the Center for Environmental Research and Education, CERI, again, a nonprofit founded by my close friend and colleague, Ms. Rashne Pardiwala, in partnership with IndusInd Bank. If I'm not mistaken, I think that Rashne has addressed this forum before on her NGO on tree planting at the Towers of Silence, and also on the extensive repairs that she undertook single-handedly. She's an outstanding and exceptional human being. The project we did at Seva Sadan is to promote renewable energy, a rooftop solar panel installation of 11.2 kilowatts. The installation has helped us accrue 157,000 rupees from our electricity bills annually, the savings which will go towards supporting more underprivileged girls. In addition to this turnkey project, Sari and Ms. Pardiwala have also run courses on the importance of climate change and global warming for our girls. By implementing this project, Seva Sadan has now aligned itself with the UN Sustainable Development Goals number 7 and 13, and is on its way to becoming ESG compliant so as to attract more socially conscious investors. Here we have the solar inverter that converts the output of a solar panel into a utility frequency that can be fed into a commercial electrical grid, and a lovely picture of the sun shining directly onto our panels. And back to England, the Sockstar Project. The Sockstar Project, founded in 2019 by Lewis Bedford and headquartered in England, supports wildlife rangers' basic needs, personal items such as clothing, hygiene, products, and equipment in 4 countries across Africa and Asia. As operational equipment, drone technology and GPS systems are indeed being made available increasingly to rangers around the world, the Sockstar team realized that basic needs for rangers are still conspicuous by their absence. We therefore chose to fill in this gap. Supported by senior global executives, we have generated in just 2 years over £30,000 for rangers all across the world, and we have supported them with nearly 1,000 different items of clothing and equipment. Sockstar also directly aligns itself with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and observes the highest standards of ESG practices. Wildlife rangers are intrinsically important to the success of the ecosystem. They remain our most critical connect to the success of environmental conservation worldwide. Rangers often live and work in holistic landscapes and climates, and their lives are constantly at risk. The larger philosophy is that if we look after both rangers, their families, and their local communities, we not only ensure the preservation of our forests, but also of wildlife by controlling one of the most perilous and destructive pursuits of the 21st century, poaching. Further, forests mitigate climate change, drought, and soil erosion. They offer watershed protection and are essential for carbon sink, as forests, soil, and trees are able to store large amounts of carbon. Above and beyond the science of all this and the oxygen produced by forests, the sheer pleasure and joy of a life spent with nature remains unsurpassed. Wilderness is both unpredictable and reassuring. It makes us feel alive. Sockstar is an associate member of the International Ranger Federation, the official representative body for wildlife rangers globally. Sockstar also has to its credit other stellar partnerships with the Ernst & Young Foundation, the Born Free Foundation, and the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation, all headquartered in the UK. Our project partners are in Zambia, Kenya, Zimbabwe, and in Assam in Northeast India. The partner in Assam is called Nanya. We funded them with walkie-talkies, and we've stepped up anti-poaching, park protection, wildlife crime investigation initiatives. This is a picture of the boxes arriving, our boxes at Aranyak in Assam, and our Wellington boots and other equipment arriving in Africa and being carried to camp by forest rangers. The Foundation for Peace and Compassionate Leadership. This organization, founded by Bharat Waklu, formerly with Tatas, and now president of Waklu Advisory, and his brother Arun Waklu, who's helped me immeasurably this evening with this talk, is executive director of Pragati. They specialize in designing and hosting programs for holistic development for leaders at all levels, both in India and around the world. Leaders create new futures. Business creates values of many kinds: physical, cultural, social, financial, natural, etc. The foundation has pinpointed 5 main problems with the earth, all to do with exploitation of the earth's resources. And they've also pinpointed socio-political and economic issues, biological pathogens as weapons of war, the wanton creation and use of weapons and armaments, terrorism, the displacement of people, stateless refugees, inequity in the creation and distribution of wealth, and the absence of good and fulfilling work for all. Holistic leadership, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. It is our firm belief that the mere accumulation of wealth without a focus on the health and contentment of people, as also the health of the environment and planet Earth, is futile. The particular focus at FPACL is on outreach programs for schools, young leaders, retreats for decision makers, business executives, and jurists, as well as workshops, conferences, and specific community-oriented projects through collaborations, media publications, etc. The foundation, through its programs, creates organizational systems such as projects, protocols, mechanisms, technologies. And to further manifest its credo, the foundation also nurtures the human dimension. There's a very interesting story behind this next slide. The Charter for Compassion provides an umbrella for several programs across the world. The Charter of Compassionate Cities, a network of 430 cities around the world, are affiliated to this charter. The Compassionate Schools Network, 3,000 schools globally, are part of this network. Our foundation, through collaboration, has started a program called Collaborating for Compassion. Thus far, 30 schools have signed up with us, but we are expecting all 3,000 schools from the Compassionate Schools Network to join our program. The results on Golden Rule Day, which is on the 5th of April every year, schools in Pune, I think last year 3, in India, talk to their counterparts in Karachi, Pakistan. Both cities subscribe to the Charter of Compassionate Cities. Interestingly, the foundation has reported that when children talk about themselves and their environment, other than gaining exposure to different people and cultures, they also realize that our humanity is shared, as indeed is our suffering and the solutions. It is my hope that this foundation will become the thought leader in finding solutions. The foundation has the World Unity Center in Srinagar in Kashmir. This world-class facility is for national and international retreats, workshops, seminars, and conversations on all that the foundation embraces and more. Like many very good organizations, the World Unity Center will also lay stress on research and development in the area of peace practices, how to minimize conflict, sustainability and sustainable economic development, holistic leadership. The center will both literally and metaphorically become a knowledge center that promotes an enhanced quality of life. You have now had an overview of most of the major organizations that I work with and for. Let us now move to what my role is in all these institutions and my organizational approach. As you've seen, I work largely in human rights with social change makers in the development and nonprofit sector, and at the crossroads that intersect with both governments, civil society, and the corporate world. The development sector also has a transformational impact on business development and vice versa. When invited to join boards and or to revive or turn around organizations and or to take them to level next, my approach initially remains much the same, irrespective of the institutions I serve. Why? Because there is an underlying commonality or dynamic in organizations, commercial or otherwise. We talk about human nature. Organizational behavior is not dissimilar. So, first steps as I join, the process of uncovering and discovering. A holistic performance measurement. How has the organization got to where it is? What are the drivers of success? What are the company's intangible assets worth, not just the tangible ones? Is there cross-fertilization of board composition between the corporate and social sectors such that there is a shared value, both social and economic? Are the structures of purpose, processes, and people aligned, the 3 Ps? Can these practices sustain? To answer this question, one has to be able to foresee and not just forecast, and there is a difference, how the purpose of the organization can be met both dynamically and productively as it evolves. Is both the structure of the organization together with its planning and strategy such that it is agile and flexible enough to handle tomorrow i.e. change and transformation, as opposed to rigidity? If not, what do we need to do? How and when? Are monolithic structures giving way to satellitic networks as partnerships and alliances become ingredients of leadership today? Most institutions now are no longer columnar in their growth and development. Instead, their architecture is so much more akin to a spider's web. How much emphasis is placed on research and development? How do we accelerate growth and enhance value creation? Is the Pareto principle employed as a conscious part of the way in which the organization functions? For those of you unfamiliar with this, it's the 80-20 concept, 20% of efforts for 80% of results. How much emphasis is placed on domain knowledge, its value in industry benchmarks? How cognizant is the organization about the increasing role of disruptive innovation? Is risk management deployed? Is the human resource function capable of attracting, retaining, and developing talent? Age factor and seniority rule the roost for decades, no longer. A broad, all-encompassing, liberal, and holistic education, together with technology, now provide access to drivers of growth. Gender ideology is women's leadership in the development sector, WID, now referred to as Women in Development, WAD, being tracked and assessed closely, particularly as so many impact issues themselves have to do with women? The gender lens is therefore even more relevant in social purpose organizations than in the corporate world, but nowhere suggesting that we ease the pressure on the latter. A recent report by the NGO Arthan in collaboration with the Rockefeller Foundation stated that 26% full-time social enterprise employees in India are women, compared to only 14% in the private sector. Shocking statistics. GuideStar India, the country's most exhaustive source of NGO information, reported that only 18% of the largest nonprofits in India have female CEOs, and another big challenge is pay disparities. So planning gender pathways to become gender transformative institutions is a high priority for many of us in the industry. Does the organization realize the need to broaden business education beyond the MBA? Thought leadership, how is that achieved? Are knowledge management practices garnering knowledge capital? Similarly, are governance systems and processes of the required dimensions in place, those that ensure that the basic culture, ethos, and values behind the purpose of the organization are met via due diligence? Succession planning, hugely neglected. And how do we retain the soul of the organization? This is a deep question that extends far beyond best practice, CSR, ESG norms, and being compliant with the UN Sustainable Goals. All buzzwords and very much in vogue and fashion, but very vital. My approach, as I have just outlined, is not dissimilar to that of management gurus, as they are called, or for that matter, the way in which McKinsey, BCG, Bain, etc., and other large management consultancy firms work, most of whom have access, in their own words, to cutting-edge digital and analytic tools. While these tools are useful and an analytic and empirical approach much needed and indeed vital for shaping the trajectory of organizations, is there something more which we can bring to the table? All organizations derive worth from consulting firms, gurus, mentors, etc. And economic performance creates enormous value. Please don't underestimate it. But there's more to business than the confines of balance sheets and other established parameters. Today's discourse, under the banner of broadening horizons, is about pushing those boundaries and parameters and extending the frontiers of the dynamics of business. From what I do, let us now discuss why and then how. So, what impelled me to embrace this role, heading and leading nonprofits? First, equity and equitable growth. With a Harvard degree, I suppose I could have worked for large corporates, but chose instead the social sector for reasons going back to what I said at the very start of this talk, that the development of a nation has to be equitable to its members. I fundamentally believe this. For me, the social sector stands out because it is intrinsically and quintessentially inclusive and non-discriminatory. Governments have not done enough. The corporate world and private sector have not done enough. Institutions of repute are failing. Trust is fast diminishing. The tools and wherewithals of economic growth is only available to those privileged few who know how to play the system. For example, banking, investing for profit, wealth management, and even legal services. The output of the social sector has therefore been indispensable to equitable national development. Take, for example, the pandemic and the way it has been handled, especially in India. Need I say more? The rise of social entrepreneurship and impact investing, I hope, will now challenge both governments and the establishment. Fortunately, technologies like blockchain and others will break this circle of privilege and become a prime force in achieving equitable growth. So what else has driven me to embrace this role? Legacy. My grandfather, paternal grandfather, Dara Khurody, he conceived and built the Arya Milk Colony in Bombay so that thousands of buffaloes kept in unhygienic stables strewn all across the city could be closed as the cattle were given better and more hygienic accommodation in units located across the new Arya Milk Colony. The owners were also accommodated at these units so that they could continue to look after their animals and find a sole buyer for the milk in the central dairy of RA. Later, Dara Khurody became the Dairy Development Commissioner and helped dairy farmers across the state of Maharashtra to both grow and flourish whilst remaining on their lands. At Shivya, we have the same ideology and philosophy as my grandpapa: keep people on their lands and develop livelihoods. The lure of life in big cities is a mirage and illusion. Consequently, my grandfather was awarded several global honors, including the Padma Bhushan in India and the International Raymond Magsaysay Award in Manila, the money from which he seeded the Khurody Dairy Education Fund, KDEF, which provides scholarships to students at the Dairy Science Institute, Arya Milk Colony, particularly to those who have rural farming backgrounds. Much as he needed the money, he didn't keep a penny for himself. There's a picture of him with Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip walking them around the Arya Milk Colony. There's a picture with Radhakrishnan giving him the Padma Bhushan. Another picture of him in Manila receiving the Magsaysay Award. And a picture with Verghese Kurian. They both received the award together. My paternal grandfather, as Dairy Development Commissioner, is remembered even today as the enabler of toned milk, offering affordable and nutritional milk, the man behind those famed words, milk for the millions. My mother's father, my maternal grandfather, Rustam Karegat, as a scion of a long family, he was the direct lineal descendant of the first Sir Jamsetji Jijiboy, the first baronet through his grandmother, and the great-grandson of the famous RJJ, all distinguished for their talent and charitable and philanthropic disposition. Rustam Karegat was a scholar of 7 ancient and modern languages, including the cuneiform script and Egyptian hieroglyphics. An archaeologist, Egyptologist, and Persian scholar, he wrote 2 books. I photographed one for you: A Tourist Guide to Iran, the most authoritative text on Iran to date, and Legends and Religions of Old Iran for children. He studied medicine and surgery at London University, was a doctor and surgeon in the British Indian Army, served in the First World War in Egypt, in Palestine, and in Mesopotamia, retired as Chief Medical Officer and Surgeon General of the Federation of Princes, was the first Indian to be loaned by the Army to the Foreign and Diplomatic Political Department, and a trustee of the Bombay Parsi Panchayat funds and properties. My grandfather, Rustam Karegat, helped to lift Parsi pallbearers and many, many others out of poverty and a life of horrific social discrimination to give them instead a life with dignity, while others made them stand outside their front doors if they called. My grandfather invited them into tea in the home in which I spent my earliest years. And incidentally, I'm speaking to you today, addressing you from his home. My great-granduncle, Mancheji Pestunji Karigat, my grandfather's uncle, his father's brother, or Justice Karigat as we know him, president of the Bombay Parsi Panchayat, marble bust at Karigat Colony in Bombay, statue at the District Court of Ratnagiri, where he was the sessions judge, elevated to the bench of the High Court, but most important, retired early because he fought against capital punishment. My uncle, Rusi Gandhi, married to my mother's first cousin, Auntie Bubbles, Khursheed Karigat, daughter of Sir Feroz and Lady Karigat, ADC to Lord Mountbatten, Vice Admiral of the Indian Navy, Governor of Himachal Pradesh, larger than life and buried at sea, at a place now named Rusi Point. His youngest daughter, my cousin Dr. Delna Gandhi, Senior Health Advisor for London's Department for International Development, was recently conferred the Officer of the Order of the British Empire in recognition of her work in tackling tropical diseases. Her elder sister, Yasmin, was chairman of Shell India. My parents, Noshir and Roshan Khurody, Ni Karigat for my mother. It's a picture of their wedding day. Picture of my mother modeling for Dior. She had that Karigat height, so she was often picked up for fashion shows. Poverty eradication was in her blood. She opened countless bank accounts for the poor with herself as a second signatory and taught them financial literacy. When we lived for several years in the Middle East, she worked for the United Nations and before leaving sent them a stiff letter saying that she was aghast as to the numbers of reports that were being written and filed but not read or being acted upon. It's a picture of her with me. And my father at his rooms in Cambridge, despite being an MA Cantab and being a Tata Administrative Service Officer, my father refused to consider more lucrative offers that were made to him, frequently by MNCs. He turned them down and worked instead for the Tata Group and has helped countless small organizations and nonprofits throughout his life at no charge. There's a picture of him shaking hands with JRD at the opening of the Tata Management Training Center in Pune, and a picture of him today. Shanti Selden. We are taught by many, influenced by some, but really rarely enlightened, unless, of course, you are lucky enough to stumble upon a Shanti Selden. Cynthia Selden, fondly called Shanti, was born in 1916 and died at the age of 96 in 2012. Outspoken and defiant from the quietude, sanctity, and privacy of her home, she stood by her ideologies and principles with an unyielding conviction, never to be confused with inflexibility. She trained generations of pianists, including me, with a ferocious and unyielding passion and fought, much like the Burmese freedom fighter Aung San Suu Kyi, one for reformation and liberation, and the other for the integrity of Western classical music, for its self-respect, dignity, and generosity, and for the value that it brings to all our lives and to humanity in general. Shanti taught us so much more than the logistics of handling an instrument or winning competitions. The piano, in fact, became a potent instrument of change. She taught us how to become subservient to something greater than ourselves. Don't ask who I am, she said to me, lesson after lesson. Ask who should I be? The piano is nothing. It's made of wood and metal. It has no human quality. Allow your mind and your body to reveal sound. Use your ingenuity to get resonance. How often do we hear management gurus speak of resonance? Aung San Suu Kyi. She needs no introduction. The infamous prisoner, a human rights activist, the pro-democracy leader, and the head of the National League for Democracy in Burma. Suu Kyi touched me when her husband, Michael Ellis, taught me at Harvard. He was, in fact, though visiting faculty from Oxford, I learned later, largely responsible for my admission to the university. He took care of me during my first year, and I interacted with him extensively and his two young sons when Suu Kyi remained under house arrest in Burma. Because I was fortunate to interact with her husband on vital issues, I got deep insights into the almost frightening sacrifices that she made in her fight for basic human rights. An indelible mark still remains, and I became secretary of Harvard's Burma Society. Consequently, one should never underestimate the influence of history and legacy and the way in which it shapes us. It helps us become and evolve. We never forget. Very quickly now to challenges. No resources. Finding talent and retaining talent is a huge problem in the nonprofit world. There is no appropriate remuneration. Unfortunately, there is a mindset that the social sector must be served voluntarily. This needs to change urgently, once and for all. Most NGOs also lack key skills. I mentioned this earlier. Processes, systems, human resource, and access to best practice. Hence, NGOs need help bringing in these systems, overcoming government apathy and bureaucracy that places unnecessary hurdles and dilutes purpose. Partnering, forming strategic alliances and building an ecosystem with governments, civil societies, funders, and the private sector. A multi-stakeholder approach is a must if nonprofits are to succeed. We can only really have impact if we scale. So more people and institutions need to come forward. I spoke a minute ago about forming an ecosystem. So I'd like to say, just give me a minute. The social sector challenges are therefore, I conclude this before I go on, are multidimensional and complex, much more so than in the corporate world. We have to do so much with so little to achieve sustainable socio-economic effects. I enjoy this extent of challenge as I am pushed every day to think unconventionally and out of the box, to play multiple roles at the same time, to realize where I can be as opposed to where I am. My favorite Noam Chomsky, the great American linguist, suggests that many of our structures, authority, hierarchy, must be challenged unless a justification for them can be made. He says, many are illegitimate and should be dismantled to increase the scope of human freedom. And I talked to you a minute ago about multi-stakeholders, and that dovetails to entrepreneurship. I learned that the purpose of this forum, the WZCC, is about building the spirit of entrepreneurship. To me, entrepreneurship is about freedom from restraints, boundaries, and spirit is about stepping out of all that one knows and is used to, because one's sense of curiosity is overwhelming, as is the passion to innovate, experiment, and try out something different and new. Possibly this spirit arises from uncontaminated innocence that sees and says, why not? From now on, though, when we talk about entrepreneurship, we must do so in its widest sense, as agents of social change. Every successful business head, which has benefited from mentoring, must take upon itself, inter alia, the duty of mentoring a social organization. Then and only then will we fulfill this thing that we call the spirit of entrepreneurship. I spoke about challenges and rewards. I've spelled out rigorous systems of due diligence and unique challenges that confront us in the development sector. Ingenuity and grit are an understatement for the lives we lead. But you must also know that the rewards are huge and significant. When we serve social purpose organizations, strategies and horizons are larger. Ideas matter. There is room for innovation. We learn how to take risks. We learn a lot. Multiple skills get honed, especially with respect to leadership, as we develop integrated projects and rarely work in silos. We change lives for the better and profoundly impact society. The vital contributions that we make to humanity and human development make us feel privileged, and the joy, I can assure you, is unparalleled. In the words of my paternal grandmother, what you have can be taken from you. What you have given is always yours. It's a picture of one of our girls at Seva Sadan, now working at TCS. I thought I'd share that with you. And finally, how? This is a picture of the ruddy Shelduk ducks, a pair of them, or called in India Brahmini ducks. And the title of my talk, Beyond Structure, the last chapter, the dynamics of lifting all that is ordinary to become objects of passion. I really couldn't think of a more passionate picture than this pair of ducks. I chanced upon them when cruising down in a rather perilous rubber dinghy, the Brahmaputra River, and learned that if one dies, the other, they always move in pairs, the other doesn't survive very long. I thought it was an incredibly romantic story. So I remembered them today when I built this discourse for you. We have discussed what I do and why, but before I close, let us quickly also look at the how. I touched upon this briefly earlier when I spoke about my role and approach in assessing the body of practices that an organization adopts, the carpentry and tools thereof. But we have to go beyond the conventional alphabet. Hence, the last among these many points was, how do we retain the soul of an institution? This is a deep question, as I said, that extends far beyond best practice. So let us now look at this soul of things through a new lens of leadership. First, create soul. How? As I said at the very start of my talk, rely on the abstract, engage with the natural world, read and write fiction and poetry, read Plato, study the liberal arts, keep dogs, take them for a walk. Can we control without being controlling? Can we lead without being dominating? The power of the narrative, share and tell stories, capture them, which is why I spent so much time today in this session sharing accounts of the NGOs that I serve, and then anecdotes and biographies of those who have made a mark on my life. Learn a musical instrument, listen to late Beethoven, observe the intrinsic nature of everything. And as Churchill said, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. All of these things, as I said at the start of my talk, have the power to deepen immeasurably an understanding of ourselves and the world around us. I repeat, we become humanists who belong to multiple worlds at the same time. Leadership is about inspiring and creating new futures. To create new futures, we need new thinking, the power of expanded vision, foresight versus forecast. So we move from the literal to the abstract. By doing this, we impact not just leadership, but also the structures that support it. Magic. What is magic? The dictionary says it is the power of apparently influencing events by using mysterious or supernatural forces, something that happens, we don't know how. Magicians have unimaginable skills. Every time we watch magic shows, we have high expectations. We equate magic with superpowers, beyond explanation, beyond achievability. Magicians have dazzled audiences for centuries. It is all about enchanting phenomena. We enter a world charged with wonder. Many things magically move us, among them music and mountains. When I enter a boardroom or look to the future of organizations that I serve, I too look for unimaginable skills, high expectations, dazzling multiple stakeholders. I look for wonder. I look for everything that will move you and me, but I don't often find it. Why? Why are the weeds of mediocrity prevalent instead? We have a Q&A session. We can pick up on that later. Mountains. I love mountains, and I'm fortunate to have spent most of my life in the country, away from big cities, in awe of the natural world and all that it has to offer. Great things are done when men and mountains meet. This is not done by jostling in the street, said William Blake. Mountains draw us toward them, again, magically. The sheer space, expanse, and lofty heights, I think, lifts you and takes you to another world. It's never about the summit, but always about the journey of ascent. Mountains offer a challenge to climb, one which we never quite master, but at every corner, we discover new vistas and gain fresh perspectives. Mountains offer us a sense of unpredictability, engaging with the unknown. Above all, they make us feel humbled. Music. The dictionary says vocal or instrumental sounds or both combined in such a way so as to produce beauty of form, harmony, and expression of emotion. For me, music arises from a space of purity and innocence, from a source like the rays of the sun. It is about an inner compulsion. Music is a language. It's about conversation and dialogue. Music is also absolutely and unequivocally about listening. It is about credibility, integrity, and trust. Music doesn't lie. It is an emotional trigger. It makes us want to dance. It cheers us and yet brings rhythms and forgotten memories to the fore. Try and imagine what a composer of classical music goes through and thereafter the player. I've done this every day of my life from the age of 3, interpreting the original intention of a composer, a combination of highly skilled training and imagination. Ironically, I find myself doing exactly the same today in boardrooms. The paradoxes and parallels between music and management are astounding. They never cease to amaze me. Let us look for a moment at ideas and relationships. Music is full of ideas and relationships, as are organizations. For us, they are relationships between ourselves and our instruments, ourselves and the composer, musicians and the score, composition, musicians and the orchestra, musicians and the conductor, ourselves and the music, and musicians and sound and silence, as important as music itself. I haven't even begun to address this topic in depth today. Really, this subject matter warrants an entirely separate session, and I'm happy to participate in such a session another time if called upon and if it interests anyone. Already, though, we've touched upon emotion, harmony, purity, dialogue, listening, credibility, integrity, trust, dance, rhythm, composition, interpretation, skill, imagination, ideas, and relationships. If this isn't boardroom leadership or leadership anywhere, then what is? Do you dance when you enter a boardroom, metaphorically? Do we trust, imagine, and compose? My journey in the world of Western classical music has helped me immeasurably discern the deeper dimensions of managing institutions, their spirit, and the people therein. Musicians are driven by passion, compassion, tenderness, and empathy. So are those who work for the development sector. Set the same tone in your organizations, humanize them, and leverage those traits in both education and leadership training, and let's see what we get. If leaders are to drive change and transformation and bring a fresh and distinct dimension to both their organizations and the people they serve, they need to first empty themselves, climb a few mountains, and come back old souls, a repository of the secrets of magic, mountains, and music. And they must meet Malak. You must meet Malak. As I close, please allow me the chance to introduce you to her. Malak is from Syria. She lives in Fallujah, an hour west of Baghdad. An NGO in Texas called Preemptive Love captured her story and helped her. I heard about her 4 years ago through the NGO Grapevine, and I have never forgotten her. In truth, she has been the spirit behind so much of my life in the development sector, the quintessence of all and everything that matters. She has taught me more than I'm able to express tonight, and through the UN, it is my hope that one day we will meet. Till then, I hope her story does for you what it's done for me. As I close, I want to thank each and every one of you for the enormous time and attention that you have given me tonight. It's been nothing short of a privilege to address all of you. Thank you very much for your time, your patience, and your attention. Yazdi?
Very good. Very good.
شو اسمك عمو؟ انت وين ابوك؟ وين؟ وين مات؟ شنو متريق متغدية متعشية؟ احكي
Her name is Malak, meaning angel.
I will never forget the day we first met, the day she escaped a war zone.
People ask how I felt meeting children who had suffered like that. How could someone so young, who had endured a siege, starvation, the death of her parents, and ISIS, hold it all in for so long? I look at her and I see my daughter. Malak broke my heart. Visiting her again was always in the back of my mind. We spent months of waiting and searching for her whereabouts. And we finally found her and got all the proper permissions to cross into this more dangerous part of the country. Malak is now 8 years old. She is in school and has made friends in her town. Her grandmother worries about her future.
وهاي ملاك يعني انتوا شفتوها تريد إلى تيم يريد مستقبل ويضمن له يعني حاجة يعني زينة. وأبوهم هم راحوا توفوا لا أخ كبير ظلت بس هي وأنا ما ظل دائما لها هم راح تكبر وتعرف أنت.
Most people notice her from her tears, but I remember her from her smile. I will never forget her courage in the face of unbelievable suffering. She is more than just a victim to be pitied. She is our hero angel to be celebrated, loved, and cheered. Malak, the desert angel, motivate us, fuel us to love anyway, give anyway, serve anyway, and go anyway. Because we know there are countless Malaks out there who need a secure future.
Thank you, Khursheed. Farzeen, will you take over the questions, please?
Yes, sure, thanks. Thanks very much, Khursheed. That was a fantastic discourse. I must say that you lead a very purposeful life, and I think that in itself is a great blessing. I think you've covered all the details and you've actually, mentioned everything. I don't think many of us have any questions or thoughts. However, there are two of them which I would like to ask. One of the questions is, how has music influenced your life and work? Can you just give us a few points, or can you touch a bit on that?
That's a very dangerous question. We'll be here till tomorrow morning. Music has done so much for me, taught me. I mean, the obvious things are some of the things I mentioned today, timekeeping, rhythm, structure, sonatas and concertos are tightly structured, learning about history, learning, obviously the emotive power that music gives me. But I think beyond everything, it's taught me that after you've learned the rules of everything, and after you have found a structure which you cannot skip it. You have to go through that discipline. You leave it all behind and you go up to another level and another plane. And I think music has given that to me. And I think what I should do the next time is probably have a completely separate talk on just music and leadership, because it's a huge subject. And there's so much to be said. But I must mention that I'm absolute ignoramus. I don't know anything about pop music. I'm a very strange young person. I never took to it. So my life has been spent in Western classical music. But for me, the suffering of Beethoven, the revolutionary etude written by Chopin has taught me about the making of the modern mind and the world that we live in today. And it's given me the spirit and energy to cope with that, deal with that, and lift myself above and beyond it so that hopefully I'm able to help others.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that. I think that was very well explained. There is another question where the person would like to know, what is the source of income or major funding of these NGOs?
The NGOs have various kinds of funding, families, private funding, people who have passed on and leave their entire inheritance to an NGO, partnerships with large banks, foundations, institutions, and some of the fundraising is done. I know in the UK we have fundraising dinners and events and balls, so we raise a certain amount of funds on our own. And it's an interesting question because I mentioned that we're always short of funds, but when there's a crisis, there's a flush of funds. So it's not that they're always short of funds, but then they don't have the wherewithal and the staff at field to be able to move at speed and execute their purpose. So it's an interesting play between organizational dimension and having the power to be able to execute things and the drive to be able to raise these funds. Obviously, at the moment in India, it's all about funding COVID, but many NGOs have gone down under, and I'm hoping that the more of us that come out and speak, the more they realize that the poorest of the poor, we've survived, but the poorest of the poor haven't, many of them. Their businesses have gone down under, they have no meals. So I really, really hope that people come forward and help the last mile link, as I call those that work at field and the front line.
Thank you. Thanks for that. There is one last question where the question is, will an empathetic and compassionate leader in a business group be able to compete in the market and give returns to his shareholders?
It's an excellent question. I think yes. I think yes, because I think a person with those qualities will bring much more to the board than those who only think about business as profits. And that used to be the benchmark. And ironically, in my lifetime, it's now shifted to thinking about the shareholders. I think about my own father. When I moved to India, he'd just taken over as CEO of Voltas, Tatas. And he'd come home every night saying, my loyalties are with poor widows, Parsi ladies and others across the country who have parked their funds with us. And I have to turn this company around to serve them. Now, of course, it's even broader. It's about multi-stakeholder relationships, the way you treat your employees, etc. So I think, yes, I think more and more the old world of board directors who just look at cutthroat competition and balance sheets, I think their world is over, thankfully. And there's room now for a much wider perspective.
Thank you. Yes, I think I completely agree with that. I think that now that the world is definitely going to move towards that way. I think that would be it for all the questions. And I once again thank you for a lovely discourse and very informative one. I hand over to Yasmin for a vote of thanks. Yasmin?
Yasmin, unmute yourself, please. Yasmin, unmute yourself. No, you have not as yet. Yasri, can you help her, please? Got it. You're on, Yasmin.
Yes, I'm sorry. My name is Yasmin Medora, and I'm from Houston, Texas. On behalf of the core committee members of the ladies wing of the WZC, I would like to thank Khurody for her amazing talk. I don't know where to start and where to end. Khursheed, we are truly inspired to learn about the various NGOs you're involved in. The Shivya Foundation and how it has impacted various lives, the Seva Sadan, the recent solar project, the Sockstar project, the collaboration for compassion, your role. Why do you do what you do? Your legacy, it is just unbelievable. I like what you said. The rewards are huge ultimately. We change lives for the better. The joy is unparalleled. Thank you so much, Khursheed, for spending your valuable time with us today. I also want to thank our Global Vice President and Technical Director, Yazdi Tantra, who is hosting this meeting. Yazdi, as usual, you have stood by us and assisted us in the smooth functioning of this webinar. What would we do without you? Thank you very much, Yazdi. I also wish to thank our energetic ladies of this core committee. They do a lot of work behind the scenes to put these webinars together. They're already planning the next webinar, so look out for it. And finally, I want to thank all of you, our enthusiastic participants from around the globe. I know the timings are varied in various parts of the globe right now. So good night to some of you and have a fantastic day to the others. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me this evening.
Thank you all. I doubt if there are any more questions. If not, we wish you good rest of the day. Oh, Natalie has a question. Can you unmute, Yazdi, could you help unmute Natalie Gandhi from USA? Natalie, unmute yourself. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much for taking my question. At 2 points in your webinar, you mentioned how your social initiatives will help reinforce and make stronger the nation state. And I wondered about your general position about the nation state. Do you think that in the future, in the long range future, we will have a world in which nation states are strengthened and encouraged? Or do you think the nation state will fade away into irrelevance? I was recently in a Thai, your annual summit from Silicon Valley, where somebody investing quite a lot in blockchain, in many, many blockchain startups, was very happy and content to say that the nation state is going to dissolve away and become irrelevant in the future. Personally, I hope that doesn't happen, but I wondered about your views about it.
Well, I tend to think it will happen. I'm very interested in technology, and I honestly think, for example, blockchain will get rid of, for example, the Reserve Bank of India, central banking, and with institutions crumbling and taking a new shape. I shouldn't say crumbling and just sort of left as rubble on the ground, but taking a new shape. I also think that the way in which we think about nation states and our borders and the parameters within which we live and work will change hugely. I think so. Maybe not in our lifetime, but I think in the next, well, maybe in our lifetime, in the next 30 years, yeah. I think it will change hugely. And I think technology will be the driver for that.
Thank you, Khursheed. I don't see any other hand up. I presume we've had all the details and answers that we wanted or were thinking of. Thank you all very much and have a rest of the day. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you for joining us on behalf of WZCC, We Ladies Wing. We appreciate your participation. Thank you all and bye.